Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro song was Mark of the Doomslayer by Karl Casey at White Bat Audio. And tonight we have kind of a very strange subject. And just a warning, I kind of pre-read some of the script. It's a little rough for a general audience. I'm not so sure if you'll all be able to hang with me on this one. And it's long. Yeah. So just be forewarned. Also, for people who's new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for joining. Also, for long-time subscribers, you know the routine. If you think you're subscribed, please double check to make sure that YouTube did not arbitrarily unsubscribe you for whatever weird algorithmic or malicious reason. I don't know. It just has happened so many times that I just ask everybody to just check. If they think they're subscribed, it doesn't mean they are subscribed. It could, so just double check. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe or just wait for a little bit to decide whether or not you want to subscribe. Now, this is a big bone of contention, and I understand why, but I, like George Washington, cannot tell a lie. So the scripts that I generate for this weekly program and for this weekly program alone come from me, but the script comes from AI. It's generated by AI. I come up with a topic, AI generates it, and I just kind of read through the script, ad-libbing when and if necessary. So if you don't like that, I understand. But this is the only place on my channel that I do it. Everything else is organic. The only reason I do it here is I work a 60-hour plus a week job, and I do all this, and I do a ton of other things too. I'm working probably 100 plus hours a week. So it's the only way I can still make this happen without dropping dead. So anyway, I just hope you all understand. All right, I'm just going to quickly go through the 6 comments I see, and then we will get started and move very, very quickly. So, good morning, Soullight USX. I just woke up. Good timing. Sally Forth Alone, good to see you again. Inner City Pigeon. YouTube just suggested this to me in my live stream list. This should be interesting. Welcome, Inner City Pigeon. Good to see you. I highly recommend you. This is not a professional operation, and I would recommend you watch the interviews first, like the pre-recorded interviews that have been edited and whatnot. This is just straight up live. I pick up one topic every week and we just do a deep dive. And this is going to be a tough one because it's going to be highly technical. So I hope I don't lose half the audience in the first half. So, all right. Thank you, Soullight Expert. Soullight Expert is lying to you. He's lying. He said you're going to you're going to live Sean's shows. Well, he means love. Or maybe he doesn't. Yeah, it's Cookie for sure. That's right, Tim Beck. Inner City Pigeon, I'm new here, but it's always interesting. Well, look, last week, that was a little unexpected. So, yeah, that was definitely interesting last week. But Philip V6C is saying it's criminal that this channel doesn't have more subs and views. We're getting there. Thank you, Inner City Pigeon. Hey, Randy Wilson 1000. Good to see you. And then half asleep. I meant love. I know what you meant. But I can't say that because it presents me in a more favorable light. It sounds like I'm editing you to make me look more favorable. So I had to just. At first, I knew what you meant. At least I thought I knew, but I didn't know. Right. I can't say it for sure. So. Anyway, all right, here we go. Again, like this is going to go long, and it just feel free to tear this apart because I'm rolling the dice on this one. I really am because it is a little too technical. So we'll see. Oh, last one. Philip saying, just done parking the Nebuchadnezzar. Looking forward to a great show. The Nebuchadnezzar. That's a pretty awesome name. It's like a Babylonian. It's named after a Babylonian king, like nasty one too. I wonder what the Nebuchadnezzar is. Anyway, all right, here we go. Oh boy, buckle up. Is the universe a projection of symmetry? The E8 lattice, a jewel of symmetry in mathematics and physics. Few structures in mathematics inspire as much awe as the E8 lattice. In technical terms, E8 refers to an exceptional Lie group, that's LIE, which is a highly symmetric algebraic object with 248 dimensions. To visualize this, mathematicians often talk about the E8 root system, which consists of 240 vectors in an 8-dimensional space, forming the vertices of a remarkable 8-dimensional shape called the Gaussian polytope. You all still with me? I think this one's a drinking one. I wish I had something to drink because I'm going to need it. And by the way, AI didn't write that. I ad-libbed that one. So, you're in good hands tonight. When this 8D shape is projected into 2 dimensions for visualization, one sees a stunning mandala of points and connections, a glimpse of its intricate symmetry. though the 2D picture captures only some of the symmetries of the full 8D object. In essence, E8 is like a cosmic jewel of symmetry, glittering in a space we can only explore with mathematics. Obviously, because we can only see 3 dimensions, right? If you evolve from the, I'm ad-libbing again. If you're familiar with the book that was written in like the late 1800s called Flatland, where the people there are 2-dimensional and they see like a 3-dimensional projection, and if you have a circle, right, or a sphere, and the sphere kind of goes through Flatland, it just shows up as a point, and then it like expands to a wider circle, and then decreases to a point. That's the way they would kind of observe it, because they can't see in 3 dimensions. So there's a little bit of that. There's a lot of that, actually. So E8's mathematical beauty comes from its exceptional. Did I just say that? No, I didn't. From its exceptional symmetry properties. It is not a part of the infinite families of symmetric groups. Rather, it stands out as one of the rare, exceptional solutions in Lie theory. The Lie algebra of E8 is 248 dimensional, reflecting how rich its internal structure is. All those dimensions correspond to degrees of symmetry in a sense. E8 symmetrically interrelates 248 independent directions, right? So, it's not just up, down, left, right, forward, and backward. It's far more than that in a mathematical space. John Conway and others have marveled at how E8 can be associated with dense sphere packings, lattices, and polytopes in higher dimensions, underscoring its reputation as perhaps the most beautiful structure in mathematics. Importantly, E8 is not just esoteric math. It has made striking appearances in physics. String theory, which has probably failed, for example, found E8 indispensable in one of its formulations. In the 1980s, theorists realized that a 10-dimensional string theory required certain symmetry groups to avoid mathematical inconsistencies. One version of string theory, the heterotic string, uses E8 by E8 as its gauge symmetry group. The E8 by E8 structure turned out to be one of the only 2 anomaly-free options for a 10D universe with gravity. In other words, without E8, the theory would break down logically. Such a deep role for E8 hints that nature might prefer this symmetry at fundamental scales. In those models, our low-dimensional world is imagined to result from E8 breaking or compactifying in complex ways, hiding most of its symmetry, a theme we'll revisit. Another headline-making example came in 2007 when physicist A. Garrett Lisi proposed what he ambitiously called an exceptionally simple theory of everything. Lisi suggested that all the particles and forces of the standard model, together with gravity, could be unified as part of one E8-based geometric structure. In his E8 theory, every fundamental field, electrons, quarks, photons, gravitons, etc., would correspond to one of E8's symmetries, literally a twist or vibration of the E8 lattice interpreted in 4 dimensions. Deep down, the particles and forces of the universe are a manifestation of exquisite geometry, Lisi wrote, explaining that many physicists suspect that physical phenomena match the patterns of some beautiful mathematical structure. E8, being exquisitely symmetrical, was a natural candidate for that structure. If E8's full symmetry were realized in nature, it would elegantly unify what now seems like distinct forces and particles into one whole. As Scientific American summarized, E8 theory describes all forces and matter as twists of a single geometric object. Although this proposal remains speculative and incomplete and met with healthy skepticism in the scientific community, it unveiled some of the beautiful structures in play at the deepest levels of nature, and kept alive the dream that a single symmetry may underlie all of physical reality. It's worth pausing to appreciate how exceptional E8 is. In the grand taxonomy of symmetry, mathematicians found only a handful of these exceptional Lie groups, E6, E7, E8, etc., outside the regular sequences. E8 is the largest and most complex of them. It has a wonderfully intricate structure with layers of symmetry interlocking in ways that mathematicians find deeply fascinating. For instance, E8's root system of 240 vectors can be rotated and reflected through the full 8-dimensional space and always map onto itself. A dizzying concept, given the complexity involved. Physically, if E8 were the universe's governing symmetry, it could contain a vast periodic table of fundamental particles as different facets of one entity. In fact, Lisi's work showed that if you embed the known elementary particles into E8 in just the right way, they nicely fill out some of E8's components, almost like finding pieces of a puzzle that fit into a pre-existing pattern. Some pieces didn't fit perfectly, which is one reason the theory hasn't been fully accepted. Yet the allure of E8 remains. It promises an all-encompassing order behind the chaos of particle physics. The mathematical beauty of E8 also resonates with a long-held belief in physics. The fundamental laws of the universe are elegant and symmetric. Newton's gravity unified the heavens and earth under one law. Maxwell's equations united electricity and magnetism. The electroweak theory unified two forces into one, each a step toward more symmetry in our description of nature. Physicists often find that when a theory is more symmetric and mathematically beautiful, it tends to be more powerful and fundamental. Many physicists believe all physical phenomena match the patterns of some beautiful mathematical structure, as one article put it. E8 is a compelling candidate for such a structure because it's one of the most symmetric constructs known. As Lisi and co-authors noted, if reality truly corresponded to E8's 248-dimensional symmetry, we would live in an exceptionally beautiful universe. In other words, if the structure of the universe at the scales of elementary particles turns out to be described by E8, then we will all have the satisfaction of knowing we live in an exceptionally beautiful universe. It sounds like circular logic, but I'll allow it. Whether or not E8 literally underpins reality, it stands as a symbol of symmetry, an icon of the idea that at the bedrock of existence lies not randomness, but a vast, intricate order. All right. Let me just see how the chat's doing, because all right. So Philip VC V6D is saying Matrix. Dr. Chaos Magic is saying, I am full open-minded. Sally Forth Alone is smiling. Inner City Pigeon says this makes Time Cube sound like child's play. Virgo Queen 202 is saying the number of dimensions are infinite. Sally Forth Alone says, I saw the sky turn into a honeycomb lattice the first time I tripped. Everything connected to everything else. Uh-oh. Is the picture freezing up a lot for anyone else? Scott's writing. Yes, Scott. Oh, boy. Let's see. How you doing, Simon Keene? Good to see you, man. Okay, so Solite US Expert just writes, I just Googled E8 240-dimensional symmetry and looked at images to get an idea of what this looks like. You can't actually, because it's 8D, you can't imagine it. Like, you can only, what you're seeing is only a shadow of what it might look like. Intermittent, oh boy. Okay, so Tim Beck says, totally sober on Salt Spring Island, 1998. 9-ish in the morning, saw a thin 2D web-like lattice. As I approached it, it moved without visible movement. I couldn't distinguish between. Get cut off. It's not as bad anymore, the picture. Oh, boy. Okay, that's good. At least you can hear me. A wee bit glitchy. Oh, boy. Maybe because I tried to put this in 4D, even though I have HD only. It being 10, 20, 50 feet away. Interesting. All right. I guess you're still with me, so we're going to dive right back in. All right. Non-human intelligences beyond the human perspective. When exploring the nature of reality, especially ideas as grand as a unifying cosmic symmetry, it helps to consider perspectives beyond our own. This brings us to the notion of non-human intelligence. By NHI, we mean any intelligent agency not of human origin. which could encompass advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, intelligent artificial beings, or even forms of consciousness not yet understood by science. The term has gained popularity in recent discussions about unexplained aerial phenomena or anomalous phenomena, UAPs or UFOs, where credible witnesses and officials have suggested that some observed technology might be not human in origin. In that context, if mysterious craft are zipping through our skies exhibiting capabilities beyond our known science, one inference is that some non-human intelligences are at work behind them. Crucially, NHI does not necessarily mean little green men from a distant planet. It simply means intelligences other than Homo sapiens. They could be extraterrestrial, interdimensional, artificial, or something wholly unknown. From a speculative science and philosophical angle, what might NHI entail? One interpretation is literally advanced aliens, beings who evolved on other planets around other stars. Another interpretation includes artificial superintelligences. For example, a future AI that far surpasses human intellect would be an intelligence of non-human origin, even if built by humans initially. More abstractly, some philosophers entertain ideas of a cosmic mind or panpsychism, where intelligence or experience could be a fundamental aspect of the universe, not confined to human brains at all. In mystical or phenomenological terms, throughout history, people have claimed contact with spirits, deities, or otherworldly entities. These too could be seen as encounters with the alleged NHI, albeit interpreted through cultural lenses. Modern analyses like those by psychologist C.G. Jung, that's Karl Jung, basically, or computer scientist Jacques Vallée have even compared UFO encounters to archetypal or psychic phenomena, suggesting the others might sometimes share a collective unconscious origin as much as a physical one. Importantly, NHI challenges us to consider perception and reality from a non-human point of view. Our human senses show us a very specific slice of reality, tuned by evolution for survival rather than truth. A bee, for instance, sees ultraviolet patterns on flowers that we don't. A bat perceives the world through echolocation, or sound. A hypothetical alien might sense electromagnetic fields or extraspatial dimensions directly. If the universe has layers of structure or symmetry that we normally miss, perhaps an NHI could perceive those layers innately. For instance, while we see a world of apples and rocks and light, an alien scientist might see directly the fabric of space-time and energy fields underlying those objects. This isn't just fanciful. Even we humans, through the extension of our own minds in mathematics and instrumentation, have managed to see things like gravitational waves or quantum wave functions, albeit indirectly. A non-human intelligence, especially one much older or more advanced, might go further. One intriguing lens to consider here is Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception. Hoffman, a cognitive scientist, argues that what we perceive is less like an objective picture of reality and more like a desktop interface on a computer. The interface, with its folders and icons, is there to hide the gory electronic details and let us interact with the computer in a useful way. Similarly, evolution shaped our perceptions to be useful for survival, not to faithfully reveal the source code of the universe. According to Hoffman, perceptual properties and categories no more resemble the objective world than Windows icons resemble the diodes and resistors of a computer. In other words, our sensed world with colors, sounds, spatial dimensions, objects, etc., is a kind of simplified, species-specific user interface, hiding the true complexity of reality. If that's the case, then perhaps a different intelligence could have a different interface. Aliens might have their own sensory and cognitive systems attuned to aspects of reality we ignore. Maybe an extra sense for underlying symmetries or a direct perception of quantum states. An AI, on the other hand, could be fed raw data about the world, say the equations of physics or the bits of the simulation, and interpret reality on that fundamental level without the crutch of a human-like interface. The upshot is that NHI might operate with a completely different reality UI than we do. Philosopher and computer science Bernardo Kastrup offers a perspective relevant here, especially regarding an alleged alleged encounters with UFOs and UAPs. Analyzing witness reports and historical patterns, Kastrup notes that the phenomenon does not seem to make any distinction between physical and psychological effects. It produces both, as if they were mere facets of one and the same causative mechanisms. In the UFO phenomenon, people report physical evidence, such as radar hits, videos, trace residues, and deeply subjective experiences, like visions and telepathic messages, which often carry archetypal or symbolic content. This blurring of the mental and physical suggests that whatever intelligences are behind it, if any, might not be operating in the neat Cartesian dualism we assume. They could be interacting with reality at a level where information and matter, or mind and body, are not separate categories as they are for us. In other words, an NHI might manipulate symbols and matter simultaneously by working through the underlying informational layer of reality, a layer where a thought or archetype and a physical event are just two sides of the same coin. Such ideas echo earlier conjectures by Jacques Vallée, who suggested the others might be using psychophysical technology, and even Karl Jung, who viewed UFOs as possibly psychic projections with physical effects. While highly speculative, these notions expand our imagination of how an advanced intelligence might perceive and affect reality, not through rockets and radios, but by tapping into the deeper code of the universe where physics and psyche intersect. In summary, non-human intelligences, whether aliens, AI, or more ethereal entities, serve as a useful hypothetical to question our assumptions. They force us to ask, what is the nature of reality if you're not viewing it with the evolved eyes and brains of a Homo sapiens? Could an alien scientist intuitively grasp an 8-dimensional symmetry like E8 because its mode of thought isn't constrained by our 3-dimensional sensory-biased intuition? Might a machine consciousness see our physical world as just numbers or geometry, and thus easily comprehend something like the E8 lattice structure behind it? Considering NHI perspectives loosens the blinders of anthropocentrism. It prepares us to explore the possibility that the universe might have structures, perhaps symmetrical, high-dimensional ones, that are real, but not obvious to human perception. And it invites us to imagine that an intelligence not limited by our evolution could notice those structures readily, perhaps relating to reality in a fundamentally different, deeper way than we do. Symmetry is the foundation of reality. Symmetry is a guiding principle in modern physics, so much so that one could say symmetry underlies every law of nature. In physics, a symmetry isn't just an aesthetic pattern. It signifies an invariance, a property that remains unchanged under some transformation. Emmy Noether's famous theorem tells us that every continuous symmetry of a physical system corresponds to a conserved quantity. For example, the symmetry of physical laws under time shift gives rise to conservation of energy. Symmetry under spatial rotation gives conservation of angular momentum, and so on. This beautifully links the concept of symmetry with the bedrock regularities of physics. The standard model of particle physics, our best theory of fundamental particles and forces, excluding gravity, is built on symmetry principles. It can be described as a tapestry of Lie groups, essentially continuous symmetry groups representing the gauge symmetries of the electromagnetic, weak, and strong forces. Each force has a Lie group, like UR1 for electromagnetism, SU2 for the weak force, SU3 for the strong force, and the interactions are dictated by those symmetries. Physicist and philosopher Viktor Weisskopf once said that modern physics is about symmetry detecting substance. The form of the laws, and thus the types of particles and forces, is determined by underlying symmetry requirements. We see this historically. James Clerk Maxwell unified electricity and magnetism when he realized they could be described by one combined set of equations, symmetric under certain transformations. Later, Sheldon Glashow, Abdus Salam, and Stephen Weinberg unified the electromagnetic and weak interactions into the electro-weak theory, showing these forces are two faces of one higher symmetry that is manifest at high energies. This push for unification is essentially a push for larger symmetry. As one article noted, unification gives a more elegant picture of how our universe observes. And indeed, physicists pursue unified theories partly because of aesthetic conviction, the belief that the true laws should be beautiful and symmetric. It's not just a hunch. Symmetry-based thinking has a track record of success. When the electroweak unification was achieved, it predicted the existence of W and Z bosons, particles that were later discovered in experiments. When Murray-Gell-Mann organized hadrons, which were particles like protons, neutrons, and pions, into symmetry families, which is the eightfold way, it led him to hypothesize the existence of quarks, which at the time were not yet observed. The idea of supersymmetry, a hypothetical symmetry exchanging fermions and bosons, led physicists to predict superpartners of known particles, though those remain unconfirmed experimentally. Time and again, symmetry has been like a compass pointing toward deeper truths. Given this, it's a natural, if bold, step to ask, could the entire universe itself be a manifestation of a single grand symmetry? Instead of just having symmetrical equations that describe forces within the universe, perhaps the universe as a whole emerges from a underlying symmetrical structure or principle. In other words, maybe symmetry is fundamental reality, and what we experience with all its diversity and complexity is a kind of symmetry breaking or projection. This idea resonates with some proposals in cosmology and quantum gravity. For instance, many grand unified field theories, GUTS, posit that at incredibly high energies, like those just after the Big Bang, all forces merge into one force due to a unified symmetry. As the universe cooled, the symmetry broke into the distinct forces we see now: electromagnetism, strong and weak. The early universe would have been a more symmetric state, and the current universe is a result of broken symmetry. If we take that to an extreme, one could imagine a perfectly symmetric state, perhaps a timeless, spaceless, mathematical object like E8 or something even more abstract, which somehow projects or crystallizes into the less symmetric state we call physical reality. One way to conceive of this is through the analogy of phases of matter. Think of water in a high-energy, high-temperature phase. Water molecules move freely, and the substance is symmetric in all directions. A liquid having continuous symmetry as a fluid. Lower the temperature, and the water crystallizes into ice, where the crystal lattice breaks the continuous symmetry. Now it has a repeating pattern. Some directions are along crystal axes, etc. The ice has less symmetry but more structure. The liquid had more symmetry but was more featureless. Could our universe be like a crystal of reality that formed from the cooling of a more symmetric substrate? This is poetic, but some theories like superfluid vacuum theory or certain approaches to quantum gravity do consider space-time as something like a condensed state from a more symmetric pre-geometric phase. In discussing symmetry as foundational, it's worth bringing in a provocative idea from cosmology. Max Tegmark's mathematical universe hypothesis, M. Tegmark argues that the universe, or the physical universe, is not just described by mathematics. It is mathematics. Specifically, our external physical reality is a mathematical structure. In his view, every entity and property in the universe corresponds to some mathematical object or relation. For a description of the world to be complete, Tegmark says, it should be expressible in a form that any sufficiently intelligent entity could understand. Alien scientists or supercomputers ought to concur on the description of reality, even if they have no human concepts. This means the description can't rely on parochial human ideas like apple or rock. It must boil down to abstract invariant structures like equations, symmetry groups, etc. Thus, Tegmark concludes that the truest description is one of pure mathematics, shorn of any human baggage. If he's right, then indeed symmetry, a mathematical concept, isn't just a feature of how we talk about the world. It might be what the world fundamentally is. Under the M, or MUH, a perfect, Platonic form, say an 8-dimensional lattice or a 10-dimensional Glabial manifold, or some other mathematical entity, could literally be the engine generating what we call reality. Our experiences would correspond to elements and relations within that structure. Tegmark gives the example that an advanced alien might describe a basketball's trajectory not with the word ball, but with millions of differential equations for the particles. Yet ideally, one could describe it in an even more compressed, symmetrical mathematical way. The key point is that symmetry in math might be more real than the everyday objects we think of as reality. If MUH holds true. Whether or not one buys Tegmark's hypothesis, it dovetails with a long-standing vein of thought that information and symmetry underlie physical reality. John Archibald Wheeler's famous phrase, "it from bit," captured the idea that things, it, derive from binary choices, bit, suggesting that the physical world is at bottom informational. Information theory itself has a symmetry flavor, because the fundamental operations like logic gates have certain invariances. Even quantum mechanics, puzzling as it is, can be formulated in terms of symmetry principles. Quantum states live in symmetry groups, group representations, etc., and informational constraints. The holographic principle, which we'll discuss shortly, also points to information measured in bits on surfaces as primary. All these threads, Noether's theorem, unified field theories, MUH, it from bit, weave a picture where symmetry information is fundamental and physical phenomena are secondary, perhaps like shadows or projections of that deeper order. Thus asking, is the universe a projection of symmetry, is not a flight of fancy devoid of scientific context. It's arguably a modern rephrasing of what many physicists and philosophers have been hinting at, that underneath the complexity of the cosmos lies a simpler, more unified layer, one characterized by symmetry, harmony, and mathematical structure. Our challenge, and maybe fate as humans, is to detect that hidden order. We do so by noticing patterns and symmetries in experimental data and formulating ever more unified laws. Each time we discover a symmetry in nature, it's as if we uncover another piece of the cosmic code. Perhaps one day that process ends with a final symmetry, a final theory from which everything else can be derived. If that ultimate symmetry is something like the E8 lattice or some other elegant construct, then indeed our universe would be interpretable as a symmetrical projection. The tantalizing hint is that we already see so much symmetry in the pieces of the puzzle. Perhaps it all clicks together in one grand symmetrical picture. The E8 lattice and hidden order. Bringing E8 back into the story, could this exceptional symmetry actually be the hidden framework of reality? Let's examine what that would mean. If E8 or an object like it underlies the universe, then the chaotic mess of particles and forces we observe is really a manifestation of a single higher dimensional order. In a sense, nature's complexity would be like a shadow cast by a simpler form. Intriguingly, some researchers and theorists have taken this idea quite literally. One group of scientists, a Los Angeles-based team called Quantum Gravity Research, QGR, has been actively exploring the idea that space-time and particles emerge from an 8-dimensional crystalline code, essentially an E8 lattice via projection. They note that E8 can be sliced or projected to lower dimensions to produce what are known as quasi-crystals, which have patterns that fill space without repeating regularly. In fact, a specific 4D quasi-crystal, sometimes called the Elzer-Sloan quasi-crystal, can be obtained from the E8 lattice. QGR's audacious hypothesis is that this 4-dimensional quasi-crystal might be the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Our familiar 3D space would then be like a further shadow or subset of the 4D quasi-crystalline structure. As QGR founder Clee Irwin mused, is there an 8-dimensional engine behind our universe? Their view is that the universe is essentially a 3D shadow of an 8-dimensional shape, E8, that exists behind the curtain of our reality. A wonderfully clear analogy comes from an Elephant Journal article. That's a weird name. You might want to fact check me on that one, or the AI. Describing this idea for lay people. It says the general idea is that E8 is an 8-dimensional lattice or shape that is suspected to be the source of our 3-dimensional reality. If E8 is your hand in the sunlight, the shadow it casts is the quasi-crystal. The shadow is a 2-dimensional object created by your hand, a kind of extension of your hand, which displays that there is a hand creating it. That is to say, the shadow of your hand is not your hand, but it points to your hand existing. In this way, the reality we live in is perhaps only the shadow of the source creating it. This paints a vivid picture. Imagine reality as a shadow, and the real hand casting it is a higher dimensional E8 structure. Just as a flat shadow might distort or obscure some details of the hand, losing the depth information but preserving outline shapes, our 3D universe might be a distorted reflection of a pristine 8-dimensional order. If one were particularly clever, the article continues, you could analyze your hand's shadow and come up with a pretty good idea of what your hand looks like, its dimensions, its angle in space, etc. Likewise, by studying the shadow patterns in our 3D, 4D physical reality, for example, the distribution of particles, forces, and their symmetries, we might reverse engineer the higher structure E8 that's casting it. In QGR's approach, these quasi-crystalline patterns in our observed world act as a geometric language or code. They are attempting to mathematically decipher this code, hoping it will unify general relativity and quantum mechanics, yielding a true theory of everything. It's a dramatic and speculative program, but it's grounded in an enticing logic. If reality is a projection of symmetry, then by decoding the projection, we uncover the symmetry. In their case, analyzing the quasi-crystal, the shadow, might lead to discovering the E8 lattice, the source. To relate this to more mainstream physics, what QGR is proposing is somewhat analogous to the holographic principle, but with a twist in dimensionality and structure. Instead of a lower dimensional boundary encoding our universe, as in the usual hologram idea, here a higher dimensional lattice projects a lower dimensional aperiodic pattern that constitutes reality. It's as if the hologram is coming from a higher dimensional crystal rather than a 2D film. But in both cases, reality is seen as emergent from a deeper order. Interestingly, both holographic theory and the E8 projection idea involve a lot of symmetry. In holography, the correspondence between a gravity theory and a lower D field theory works because the two share matching symmetrical descriptions. In the E8 lattice picture, the quasi-crystal inherits properties from E8 symmetry. For example, certain invariants or constraints in how points are arranged. There's also a connection to be made with how symmetry breaking could give rise to complexity. E8 is a highly symmetric object. Our world clearly is not perfectly symmetric. We have many particle types with different masses, we have entropy, etc. If the universe began in or is governed by something like E8, then much of what we observe could be due to that symmetry being broken or incompletely manifested in lower dimensions. Particle physicists talk about this a lot. The idea that, for example, above a certain energy, the electroweak symmetry is unbroken, and the electromagnetic and weak forces merge. Below that energy, the symmetry breaks via the Higgs mechanism, and we get distinct forces and particle masses. By analogies, one could speculate that our whole universe is a low-energy, broken symmetry shard of a higher symmetry reality. The full E8 might be visible only at immensely high energy, or perhaps in the very fabric of space at the Planck scale. As the Elephant Journal article puts it, the reality we live in is perhaps the shadow of the source. These quasi-crystals, or shadows, exist in our 3D reality, and the idea is that by analyzing them, we can discover the source that is casting them, the hand creating the shadow. Let's also recall Lisi's work in this context. In Lisi's E8 theory, he indeed treated the various fields of physics as shadows of an E8 structure. The E8 Lie algebra contains subalgebras that look like the symmetries of the standard model. In fact, one finds within E8 patterns corresponding to SU3, SU2, and U1 the gauge groups of quarks, weak force, and electromagnetism, and even patterns that resemble the graviton's degrees of freedom. Lisi's paper famously included a beautiful graphic of the E8 root system with various roots highlighted to correspond to known particles. While his specific theory didn't withstand all challenges, such as issues with chiral, fermions, and gravity coupling, etc., the core idea remains inspiring. Maybe all the disparate particles we've named, electron, photon, up quark, down quark, gluon, etc., are unified as part of one geometric object. They might be like different vibrations or orientations of one fundamental lattice or crystal. This is very much in line with older ideas too, like Plato's suggestion that the elements correspond to perfect polyhedral cubes or shapes, so cubes, tetrahedron, etc., or the Pythagorean dream that all is number. Here, it's all is symmetry, group, the ultimate reduction of diversity to unity. We should mention that beyond E8, other symmetrical structures that have been proposed as candidates for the universe's hidden order. Some have wondered if the universe is a cellular automaton, which is a grid of bits evolving by simple rules, that has a symmetry of information processing. Others have looked at higher dimensional polytopes, or even the Leech lattice in 24 dimensions as potentially relevant to physics. The latter appears in string theory related to monster group symmetry. The common thread is the suspicion of what looks random or arbitrary in nature may actually reflect a piece of some huge unified symmetric pattern. It's like seeing leaves, flowers, fruits, and realizing they all originate from one tree. If we only track down the branches to the trunk. Could E8 be the trunk of physical reality's tree? Some certainly hope so. Before moving on, let's underscore a subtlety. If the universe is a projection of something like E8, then something might not necessarily be a static lattice. It could be a dynamical system whose symmetry group is E8, or an E8 structure that evolves. Garrett Lisi's theory, for instance, imagined a dynamic E8 valued field, a sort of super connection on space-time. QGR's emergence theory considers processes on the quasi-crystal, not just the shape itself. So the idea isn't that a gigantic crystalline scaffolding is sitting out there. Rather, the rules of the universe may be written in the language of a symmetry like E8. The actual code running the universe could be symmetric even if the outcomes, when projected, look asymmetric. This is akin to how the law of physics themselves often have symmetry even though outcomes don't. For example, the laws of physics are rotationally symmetric, but if you drop a dinner plate, it will break into a pattern that is not perfectly symmetric. The asymmetry comes from initial conditions and symmetry breaking, not from the underlying law. In conclusion, the E8 lattice serves as a powerful metaphor and candidate for a hidden order of reality. It exemplifies how a higher dimensional symmetry might be rich enough to encode everything we know, whether via Lisi's unified field, or QGR's quasi-crystal, or string theory's compactification. E8 looms as a kind of ideal of symmetry. If the universe is a projection of symmetry, E8 is one of the brightest symmetries on the theoretical horizon, a shining example of cosmic order that could, in principle, be casting very complex shadows indeed. Now let's talk about perception, reality, and the interface. If our universe is in fact a projection of a deeper symmetric reality, a curious question arises. Why do we not directly see that deeper reality? Why is it that we perceive apples and rocks and stars instead of, say, E8 roots or quantum wave functions? We touched on part of the answer already. Our human perception is limited and evolutionarily tuned. Now let's dive deeper into the idea of our senses and perhaps even our cognition as an interface that hides the underlying truth. Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception, ITP, provides a striking framework here. According to Hoffman, our sensory experiences are like the desktop of a computer. We talked about this earlier. The desktop displays simple icons, a blue rectangular file icon, for instance, that bear little resemblance to the complex reality inside the computer. The file's actual binary code and the hardware's transistors. The icon is not false per se. It is a useful fiction simplifying a truth in order to make it actionable for the user. Crucially, the icon's job is not to depict underlying reality accurately, but to enable effective interaction. In the same vein, Hoffman argues, evolution molded our perceptions to be fitness-enhancing, not truth-telling. We see a world of solid objects with colors and sounds because that's a convenient way for a human organism to navigate and survive. But the objective reality, whatever it is, could be radically different from our everyday picture. Hoffman uses the analog explicitly. The interface theory claims that perceptual properties and categories no more resemble the objective world than Windows icons resemble the diodes and resistors of a computer. Our perceptions spare us the tiresome details of reality's true structure, just as a desktop spares you from managing millions of voltage flips in your CPU. It's a fundamental eight-dimensional symmetry, or if a fundamental eight-dimensional symmetry is driving everything, there's no evolutionary reason we need to perceive eight-dimensional patterns directly. Instead, we get a dumbed-down 3D spatial world with objects like tiger or apple that were relevant for our ancestors' survival. This notion makes sense of why the world doesn't obviously shout, I am E8 or I am a simulation to us. The truth could be encoded in ways our senses and brains can't readily decode. We're essentially looking at the user interface of reality, not its source code. The interface presents space as three-dimensional, maybe because that's how our primate brains model the world, and time is a simple linear flow, and objects as having colors and textures. Meanwhile, the real mechanism might involve things like 248-dimensional vector spaces, complex amplitudes, entanglements, higher dimensional geometries, all completely outside the scope of ordinary perception. This is why we need science and experiments to infer those things. We build particle colliders and examine cloud chamber tracks to deduce the existence of quarks. We didn't evolve to see quarks with naked eyes. In a sense, science is our attempt to open the hood of the interface and peek at the machinery underneath. Now, consider again the possibility of non-human intelligence in light of this. If NHIs exist, especially ones more advanced or just differently evolved than us, their interface could be quite distinct. A simple example is animals on Earth. A dog's world is dominated by smell. It sees rich scent landscapes we're almost blind to. A bird of prey sees ultraviolet trails of rodent urine, etc. An alien being might have extra senses or cognitive frameworks to perceive, say, higher spatial dimensions or the true nature of quantum phenomena. If an alien evolved in an environment where 4 spatial dimensions were accessible, just hypothetically, its brain might natively grasp 4D geometry that we can only approximate with math. If an AI system lives in a purely digital environment, it might directly perceive the bits underlying things rather than the analog shapes we see. One could speculate on an extreme, an entity that perceives the mathematical structure of reality directly. It doesn't see a tree as a brown trunk and green leaves. It sees a complex fractal or algorithm that represents the tree's true informational content. To such an entity, an E8 lattice or a fiber bundle might be as tangible and obvious as a chair to us. This is far out, but it's consistent with Hoffman's logic that different agents have different interfaces. Interestingly, Tegmark's MUH, which we mentioned earlier, contends that a description of reality, to be complete, should be understandable to non-human entities like aliens or even computers. That implies stripping away all human-specific concepts and reducing things to the most universal descriptors, which would be mathematical structures and relationships. So in a way, Tegmark is saying if aliens and AI can grok reality, they must converge on the mathematics, the symmetry, because that's the part of reality not tied to human particularities. A proton is a proton to anyone in the universe. An oatmeal cookie is a concept only certain evolved beings care about. This again suggests that an NHI might view reality in a more abstract, symmetry-focused way. Now let's tie this back to the notion of the universe as a projection. If indeed reality is a projected shadow of a higher order, then our senses are picking up the shadow, not the source. It's Plato's cave. We see moving shadows on the wall and take that for reality. In Plato's allegory, the philosopher is like someone breaking free and turning to see the actual objects casting shadows, and beyond them, the sunlight, the ultimate source. In our context, doing science and philosophy is somewhat like that turning around, trying to infer the forms, the higher structures, from the shadows, our observations. But if we remain chained by our evolved interface, we might never see the full truth directly. Only by developing new ways of observing or thinking, telescopes, microscopes, equations, maybe even altered states of consciousness, do we inch closer to perceiving the underlying reality. It's fascinating that some accounts of mystical experiences or certain psychedelic experiences report a feeling of seeing reality as it is, sometimes described as geometric patterns underlying everything or a profound unity. Could it be that those experiences, however subjective, hint at alternative modes of perception where the brain's normal filtering, the interface, is altered, and a bit more of the raw data bleeds through? That's speculative, and not to say it's a reliable glimpse of truth, but it's interesting that descriptions often involve geometry, light, unity, etc., which sound like attempts to articulate something beyond everyday forms. Hoffman even raises a thought experiment. What happens when a conscious agent's desktop body senses is terminated? Does the underlying file, consciousness, or whatever fundamental reality cease? Or is it merely no longer accessible through the interface? In other words, if our avatar in the simulation dies, does our code get deleted? Or do we not have a window into that world anymore? This parallels the classic mind-body problem, but framed in terms of interface versus reality. It hints that reality could have layers. The interface layer that can vanish like a body dying, and a deeper layer that might persist like data on a hard drive even after the monitor is off. Some interpretations of NHI, especially in spiritual traditions, suggest exactly that intelligences can exist in realms not normally perceivable, the code realm, so to speak, and occasionally log into our interface or appear in our world in various guises. To stay grounded, even without invoking mystical ideas, the interface perspective strongly supports the notion that the universe could have a lot going on under the hood that we never directly sense. We shouldn't expect to see an 8-dimensional lattice any more than we expect to see Wi-Fi signals with our eyes. But through theory and experiment, we might detect the imprint of that lattice, just like we can build devices to detect Wi-Fi. If NHI have already mastered physics much beyond ours, they might have effectively peeked behind the interface and reprogrammed it. For example, suppose the UFO phenomenon is real and some craft can accelerate instantaneously or appear, disappear. Those would violate our physics unless our physics is just an interface. If there's a deeper code, some high-dimensional symmetry or other engineering space, perhaps such feats are possible by manipulating that code directly. This is highly conjectural, of course, but it aligns with the idea that an advanced intelligence might operate on reality at a more fundamental level than we do. In summary, our perception is limited to a narrow band of reality structure. It gives us a useful simulation of the world, not the literal world. Thus, the fact that we don't see the universe's symmetric underpinnings with our senses is no longer against their existence. It's expected. We must use our intellect, tools, and perhaps even imagination to deduce those underpinnings. Non-human intelligences not sharing our evolutionary pathway might have an entirely different, maybe broader relationship to the underlying reality. The interface metaphor teaches humility. We shouldn't assume the way reality appears to us is how it truly is. It could be a projection, a simplification, much like the shadow on Plato's cave wall or the icon on Hoffman's desktop. And if we yearn to know what's really behind it, we have to be willing to step outside our usual modes of perception. In doing so, we edge closer to seeing the universe's symmetry directly, or at least formulating it in our theories. The holographic reality, projection from a boundary. One of the most intriguing developments of theoretical physics over the past few decades is the idea that our universe might be holographic. This doesn't mean the universe is an illusion or fake. It refers to a specific and deep mathematical conjecture that everything happening inside a volume of space can be described by information defined on the boundary of that volume, with one less dimension. In other words, in principle, the entire 3D plus time universe could be a projection of data existing on a 2D surface, just like a hologram produces a 3D image from information on a flat film. This idea stems from the physics of black holes. In the 1970s, Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking found that entropy, information content, of a black hole is proportional to the area of its event horizon, not its volume. That was a clue that nature might store information holographically. In 1997, Juan Maldacena made a groundbreaking proposal known as ADS-CFT duality, often just called the holographic duality. He considered a toy universe, a hypothetical space with constant negative curvature called anti-de Sitter space, ADS. Maldacena showed that a gravity theory in 5D ADS space is equivalent to a quantum field theory on the 4D boundary of that space. Gravity in the bulk, the volume, was mirrored by quantum particles on the boundary with one fewer dimension and no gravity. This was like saying what happens in a region of space can be fully enclosed by a theory living on the surface of that region. It was a mind-bending claim, but over the years it has held up to intense scrutiny and led to thousands of research papers. How does this relate to symmetry? Well, the reason the duality worked is that the two theories, the bulk gravity and boundary field theory, shared the same symmetry structure. For example, the boundary theory had something called conformal symmetry, hence CFT, conformal field theory, meaning it's symmetric under local scale transformations, like zooming in or out changes nothing. The ADS space's physics also had symmetries that matched. Essentially, the geometry of ADS has an isometry group that corresponds to the conformal symmetry group of the boundary. That these two have the same symmetries was an important clue, Maldacena recalls. This highlights a key point. Symmetry is the bridge that allowed two seemingly very different theories, one with gravity, one without, one in 5D, one in 4D, to be identified as actually the same thing in different guises. The success of the ADS-CFT idea has led physicists to conjecture that perhaps our universe, which is not ADS but de Sitter-like with positive curvature, might also have a holographic description. If so, it can mean that everything we experience in 3D space is encoded on some distant 2D surface. This is as above, so below, as without, so within, etc. Okay, the Hermetic principles. Possibly the cosmological horizon or something analogous. Leonard Susskind and others have championed this view as a way to reconcile quantum mechanics and gravity. In a broader sense, it implies that space-time itself might be emergent. As one Scientific American article summarized, research in the years since Maldacena's work suggests space-time may not be fundamental. It may be something that emerges from quantum entanglement in a lower dimensional system. Think about that. What we consider the fabric of reality, space and time, might arise from something deeper, quantum information entanglement, that is organized in a more symmetric, lower dimensional way. This is a concrete example of the universe as a projection of something else. If the universe is holographic, it doesn't directly mention E8, but it underscores the theme that reality might have a dual description. One in terms of our familiar 3 + 1 dimensions, and another in terms of fewer dimensions and perhaps more abstract variables. In the dual description, the boundary, things might be more tightly organized by symmetry. like the conformal symmetry in Maldaceno's case. On the flip side, from the bulk perspective, certain symmetries aren't obvious. For instance, gravity in the bulk is a messy thing, but on the boundary, it corresponds to well-behaved quantum fields. This is analogous to how a projection can simplify or hide certain aspects. The holographic idea even suggests that the dimensionality of space we perceive is kind of like a derived concept. It's not fundamental. There's also a fascinating interplay with thermodynamics and information. The laws of physics as we know them, Einstein's equations, etc., might themselves be emergent from maximizing entropy subject to some constraints on a holographic screen. Some researchers, like Eric Verlinde, have proposed gravity itself is not fundamental but an entropic force arising from this holographic storage of information. If so, gravity, which shapes the universe at large scales, would be a kind of projection effect of underlying information geometry. The symmetry in that underlying picture might be very high, perhaps something like all microstates being equally likely, etc., which is a symmetry assumption in statistical mechanics. For a more imaginative twist, if the universe is a hologram, one could picture that we, inside the hologram, are like characters in a 3D movie being projected from a film. We might notice internal consistency, laws of physics, but not realize that, for instance, the real source code is on a 2D surface far away. If you and I are such characters, everything we do is encoded on that film, including this conversation. Now, if some being outside the film or in another part of the film interferes with it, weird things might happen in our world, like glitches in a projection. This is analogous to how in some hologram theories, if you disturb the information on the boundary, you'd affect what happens in the interior. One could loosely use this to speculate about phenomena we can't easily explain. Maybe they are boundary conditions fluctuations rather than bulk causes, but that's just a whimsical notion. Bring this back to symmetry. In a holographic view, one may say the universe is a projection of the symmetry information at its boundary. The boundary might have a more regular structure, like a lattice of information bits or a network of entangled quantum states, which is not obvious in the projected volume. Some research even connects tensor networks, which have a kind of discrete lattice symmetry, with emergent spatial dimensions via holography. In these tensor network models, the geometry of space arises from the pattern of entanglement, and those patterns can be symmetric, like a regular tiling. So holography gives us a working example where the universe, space, gravity, and everything else is indeed a projection from a more symmetric informational substrate. It's not proven for our universe, but it's the leading idea in quantum gravity. It also philosophically dovetails with our theme. If we live in a projection of symmetry, the holographic principle is a formal way that could be true. One cannot mention projections and holograms without invoking the popular culture reference. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. In Star Wars, a little droid projects a 3D image of Princess Leia. That image is made of light and has shape and motion, but it's emanating from a small recording in R2-D2. Now imagine everything around you is similarly a Leia, and the real projector is something like a distant 2D cosmological horizon with qubits inscribed on it. It's a heavy thought, but modern physics has seriously entertained it. Stephen Hawking's final research with Thomas Hertog, for example, considered a kind of holographic model for cosmology, where the universe's initial state is encoded holographically. They even used the phrase that the universe is a hologram in describing some of those ideas. To be clear, when physicists say the universe is a hologram, they don't mean it's fake or that we're living in a laser projection. It's a statement about dual description and dimensionality. But it strongly reinforces the motif that the essence of reality might live in a different arena than the one we experience. And crucially, symmetry is typically what links the two arenas. The 2D and 3D pictures in ADS CFT had matching symmetries. That's why one could stand in for the other. This is reminiscent of E8's projection too. The 2D drawing of E8's roots we embed above is not the full E8, but it retains some symmetries of the original, not just all. The better the projection preserves symmetry, the more faithfully it renders the source. or it represents the source. Perhaps our universe preserves just enough of the source's symmetry that we can still detect there's something special, like how the Standard Model's group theory hints at a larger group like E8 beyond it. Many physicists do feel the Standard Model is a shadow of a grander unified theory. This is why they look for supersymmetry or gut symmetry at higher energies, expecting the broken pieces to come together. In summary, the holographic principle gives a concrete scientific paradigm where the universe projection idea is taken very seriously. It suggests space and everything in it can be viewed as information painted on a boundary with one less dimension. If true, our reality is as much about information and symmetry on that boundary as it is about particles and fields here inside. It's a powerful validation of the projection metaphor, and it means our quest to understand reality might involve looking not just inward at smaller scales, but outward at cosmic symmetries and information capacities. The ultimate symmetry might be the one that allows a constant holographic dual, a symmetry connecting the description of reality in different dimensional terms. All right, then there's the simulation argument and symmetry as code. Moving from modern physics to a more philosophical and famous in pop culture idea. What if our reality is not only a projection, but a designed simulation? The simulation hypothesis posits that our universe could be an artificial simulation akin to a computer program running on some advanced substrate. In this scenario, everything we experience is essentially virtual, emerging from underlying computations rather than being fundamental physical substance. While at first this might sound like a wild sci-fi notion, it has been given serious philosophical consideration, notably by Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom. Bostrom's 2003 paper put forth a now well-known trilemma, often called the simulation argument. It goes roughly as follows. At least one of these three statements must be true. Number one, almost no civilization reaches a post-human stage capable of running high-fidelity ancestor simulations due to self-destruction or insurmountable technological limits. Or two, advanced civilizations do reach such a stage but choose not to run simulations for legal, ethical, or uninterested reasons. Or if many simulations are run by advanced civilizations, the number of simulated conscious beings would vastly exceed the number of original base reality beings. So statistically, we are almost certainly living in a simulation. In short, either it's impossible or rare to create a simulation of a universe with conscious beings, or if it's possible and such sims are made in great quantities, we're probably inside one. Ostrom himself doesn't claim we are in a simulation, but he argues one of those three must hold. The argument is clever because it doesn't rely on any science fiction fluff. It's a logical disjunction. Now, if we are in a simulation, what does that mean for our discussion of symmetry and reality? It means the ultimate reality is not the physics we observe, but the platform running the simulation. Our universe's laws would then be akin to the rules of a program. Those rules could be anything, but we might suspect the programmers or the automatic processes chose rules that are compact and elegant. In other words, symmetric and mathematical, because that makes the simulation efficient or interesting. Indeed, our physics is very elegant in many ways, which some have pointed to as a hint of design. For example, why does mathematics describe the universe so well? If the universe is mathematics or code, that would make sense. In a simulation, the underlying code is the analog of the higher dimensional symmetric structure. The world we see is a rendering of that code. If the code has symmetrical properties, the rendered world might display them as well. For instance, if the simulation's core algorithm conserves certain quantities like energy or electric charge, that will appear to us as a symmetry. Time translation symmetry leads to energy conservation, etc., by Noether's theorem. In fact, one fun way to think about symmetries is as constraints or invariants in the program. A simulator might impose strict constraints like the speed of light, Planck's constant, to keep the sim stable or meaningful. Those show up to us as deep symmetry principles or invariant quantities. One could even imagine that something like the E8 lattice is literally part of the code, so the simulation computes interactions via E8 operations. The well-known cellular automaton called Conway's Game of Life produces complex patterns from simple rules on a grid. That grid has a built-in symmetry, a 2D square lattice symmetry, and discrete time steps. The patterns in the game of life can evolve to make gliders, pseudo-organisms, etc., none of which know they exist on a grid, but all of which ultimately are consequences of it. If our universe runs on a kind of lattice like E8 or a 3D, 4D analog of it, the high-level entities, like us, might not see the lattice directly, but subtle effects, maybe something like discretization of space or preferred directions at very small scales, could hint at it. It's notable that certain approaches to quantum gravity, like loop quantum gravity or even string theory, imply a discrete or structured Planck scale picture, spin networks, etc., albeit not as regular as the lattice. Another link, the idea of digital physics, suggests that at tiny scales, space and time might be made of finite bits, like a cellular automaton. If so, symmetry might take the form of automorphism of a graph of or invariance of a code. For example, the error-correcting codes used in computers have a kind of internal symmetry. They can detect or correct certain errors regardless of specific disturbances. Some physicists have noted that the equations of string theory's ADS-CFT correspond to error-correcting code properties which protect the information in the bulk from erasures on the boundary. This raises the possibility that the universe's robustness, the fact that consistent physics emerges and persists, could be because it is built on something like a self-correcting code, a very high form of symmetry that guards reality's consistency. If advanced NHI exist as simulators, then we and our entire perceived cosmos are their creation. This is reminiscent of theological ideas, a creator of the universe, but in a secular technological form. Arthur C. Clarke once wrote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If an advanced intelligence created our universe as a simulation, to us that entity is effectively God, though it might just be a geeky super civilization running experiments. Such beings would see the real base reality, the computer, the higher dimension, whatever it is, and see our entire universe as a data structure. From their perspective, perhaps it's trivially evident that universe equals math. They might even run multiple simulations, varying initial conditions, exploring different symmetry breakings, different laws to see what happens. We inside only know the one set of laws we have. However, one must ask, why would a simulating entity choose a highly symmetric design like E8 or the laws we have? Bostrom's argument doesn't say anything about the nature of the simulation's content. Some have speculated maybe our simulators favor complexity or even specific narratives. But one plausible notion is that the simplest way to get a rich, stable universe is to base it on elegant mathematics, much like a programmer prefers clean code. A symmetric framework like E8 could be like a well-organized engine that naturally produces variety when run. Indeed, Garrett Lisi's E8 theory was, in a sense, an attempt to write the source code of the universe in a single coherent snippet. The E8 Lie algebra as the blueprint for all fields. Although that code isn't fully verified, it shows what such a source code might look like. It's also possible that certain symmetries are necessary for self-consistency. For example, without Lorentz symmetry, the symmetry underlying special relativity, one could have causality problems or preferred frames, maybe a messy simulation. Without gauge symmetry, charge might not be conserved. The sim could blow up with infinite energy or something else. So perhaps any simulation that lasts and produces conscious life must incorporate key symmetries. There's an argument akin to the anthropic principle here. Only in a universe with stable atoms requiring certain symmetry and constraints can observers like us exist to notice. So even if simulations were random, we'd find ourselves in one of the nice ones with lots of symmetry. Interestingly, some physicists have even searched for signs of simulation in physical data. One idea was to look for pixelation in high-energy cosmic ray distributions. If space is a grid, very high energy particles might scatter off the grid in a detectable way. So far, nothing conclusive has appeared, but it shows the concept is taken semi-seriously by a few. Other proposals consider whether quantum phenomena, like the probabilistic wave function collapse, might hint at an underlying computation, like a random number generator in the code deciding outcomes. Now, whether or not we're simulated, the simulation metaphor is useful. It essentially says reality as we know it is a layer, and beneath it, something like code, logic, information, which is the true reality. That aligns perfectly with the theme of projection. The code is the symmetrical structure. The running program is the projection. If we imagine a simulated simulation in civilization inside a computer, and that civilization has scientists, they might eventually figure out the code by logical reasoning, even if they can't escape their world. That's analogous to us trying to find the theory of everything. We're reverse engineering the program from inside by finding patterns, conservation laws, particle spectra, geometric unifications. If one day we find a complete self-consistent theory of everything that can't be reduced further, one might ask, is that the code? Or is that code still running on a deeper platform? This leads to a potentially infinite regress. Maybe their reality is also a simulation, etc. It's like Russian nesting dolls, which Bostrom and others have discussed. But from our perspective, nailing down the deepest symmetry we can find is as good as finding base reality, at least until evidence suggests otherwise. One might wonder, if it's a simulation, where do non-human intelligences come in within the sim? They could simply be other simulated beings, like aliens in the same simulation as us. Or they could be NPCs, as we all know, means non-player characters, inserted or controlled by the simulators for some purpose. This edges into science fiction. However, if some UFOs or phenomena were inexplicable by our physics, the simulation scenario offers a possible explanation. Maybe the simulators are tweaking things or allowing an in-bleed through from a parallel sim, etc. It sounds fantastical, but interestingly, some scientific-minded people have half-jokingly suggesting events like the Mandela effect, people recalling alternative histories, might be glitches in the sim. We should remain skeptical of such claims, but it's a testament to how simulation theory has permeated thought that folks reach for it to explain anomalies. Ultimately, whether holographic or simulated or whatnot, the common thread is the idea of reality as layers. The layer we directly observe might emerge from a deeper one built on symmetry and information. When we say projection of symmetry, simulation theory gives a literal mechanism. The projection is the rendering of the code's logic into perceptual phenomena. And symmetry is likely a property of that code. Could the universe be running on an algorithm that revolves around, say, E8 or some similar object? If someone in the future finds a way to unify physics with E8 and it matches all experiments, we might wryly say, well, it looks like the universe runs on E8, perhaps literally. At the very least, thinking in terms of simulations encourages us to not take the rendered world at face value, but to dig for the rules beneath it, which in physics are often symmetrical equations. To sum up this section, the simulation hypothesis provides a narrative in which the universe is explicitly a design projection, potentially of a very symmetric and mathematical foundation, the program. It underscores the primacy of information and rules over tangible substance in defining reality. For our theme, it's a dramatic illustration of how non-human intelligence, the simulators, and the nature of reality intersect. Advanced beings might create entire worlds by imposing an underlying symmetry, information structure, and letting it play out. It invites us to consider that what we call laws of physics might be the stylized fingerprints of someone else's engineering. Whether or not that's true, this perspective enriches our appreciation of symmetry. It might not just be a human mental construct, but literally the operating system upon which worlds can be built. Bridging consciousness and symmetry. No exploration of reality's fundamental nature would be complete without addressing consciousness, especially since our theme includes non-human intelligence and deep philosophical angles. How might consciousness relate to the idea of the universe as a projection of symmetry? Could it be that mind itself is tied into these symmetrical patterns or hidden layers of reality? One speculative idea is that consciousness might be an intrinsic aspect of the fundamental structure, a view related to panpsychism, the notion that consciousness, or at least proto-conscious aspects, are present in all matter. If the universe at root is an informational or mathematical structure, one could ask who or what is reading that information. In a simulation scenario, consciousness could be just another emergent phenomenon. But some have suggested that perhaps consciousness is primary and the physical world secondary, an idealistic monism view as opposed to materialistic monism. Philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, for instance, argues for cosmopsychism, that the universe is essentially a mental phenomenon, and what we see as physical is likely a representation of mental processes. If such were true, the symmetry behind reality might be a symmetry of mind rather than matter. The interesting overlap is that many symmetric patterns and mathematical truths are discovered by consciousness. That might seem obvious since we're conscious and we find them, but what I mean is mathematics and symmetry often feel like a realm we uncover, not invent. Plato famously believed mathematical forms and symmetries were in a timeless realm of forms which our souls recollect. If indeed the universe is a projection of symmetry, one could liken it to Plato's idea that the world is an imperfect reflection of perfect forms. In Platonism, these forms, circle, square, beauty, etc., are almost akin to thoughts in a cosmic mind, or at least abstract entities with a sort of ideal existence. So one could say maybe the universe as we see it, the cave shadows, is a projection of a higher reality of perfect symmetry, i.e. Plato's illuminated forms. And perhaps consciousness is our ability to tap into that realm of forms. This is a mystical or philosophical way to tie consciousness to symmetry. The reason we can grasp E8 or complex math is because our consciousness is connected, however tenuously, to that deeper reality. The physicist and cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman extends his interface theory to a theory of consciousness. He proposes that objective reality might consist of conscious agents exchanging experiences. Our physical world, then, is a representation and interface of that network of conscious agents. Interestingly, if consciousness is fundamental and has its own laws, those laws might be symmetric too. Perhaps multiple conscious agents have symmetries in their interactions, like if two agents swap perspectives, some structure is invariant, a kind of relational symmetry. Hoffman and colleagues have even tried to derive physics from a model of conscious agents interacting. It's highly speculative, but it represents an approach where mind is part of the foundational code. Now consider non-human intelligences from a consciousness perspective. If indeed advanced NHIs exist, they might have expanded states of consciousness relative to us. Perhaps they can integrate more information or perceive multiple dimensions or experience a unity with the environment in ways we typically do not. Some accounts of encounters, take them with a grain of salt, describe telepathic communication or a sense that the beings have a hive mind or a higher awareness. If those were true, hypothetically, it could imply their consciousness taps into levels of reality structure that ours normally doesn't. For example, maybe they can directly sense the collective unconscious, a concept Carl Jung suggested, where archetypes and symbols are shared across minds. Jung himself, in Flying Saucers, a Modern Myth, speculated that UFOs might be archetypal manifestations from the collective unconscious triggered by something unknown. In that view, the others might be coming from inside the mind space that underlies reality, rather than from a distant star. This blurs the line between subjective and objective in a way that again resonates with the idea that those distinctions are just interference level, not fundamental. In plainer terms, if the universe has a hidden symmetric order, and if consciousness is somehow fundamental, then possibly what we call spiritual experiences or alter states are when an individual mind temporarily tunes away from the ordinary interface and glimpses patterns of the deeper order. People who meditate deeply or ingest psychedelics often report geometric visions, sometimes intricate symmetric patterns, or feelings of oneness, symmetry between self and other. It is as if stripping away the normal filter reveals a more mathematical or unified backdrop. Some neuroscientists would say that it's just the brain's visual cortex misfiring or finding patterns. But an open-minded interpretation is that maybe those patterns aren't arbitrary. Maybe the brain is aligning with something real but ordinarily hidden. Consider also NDEs, near-death experiences, where people often claim to go to a realm of light, encounter a life review, etc. One might cynically say that's the brain's hallucination under duress. Another perspective, maybe when the interface of the body begins to fall away, approaching death, the mind transitions to a different mode where it interacts with reality's source more directly. If that source has structures like some claiming seeing a grid or a light web of interconnected souls, that could be interpreted in our context as glimpsing the code or the network of conscious agents. Again, there are speculative leaps, not scientific consensus, but they show how thinking of the universe as a projection of symmetry and information can incorporate even the consciousness dimension. Now, one might ask, if the universe, or if the ultimate reality is symmetry information, what is the role of consciousness in it? Is consciousness just an epiphenomenon that arises when information becomes complex, as many physicists think, or is it woven into the very fabric of the universe? If one leans toward the latter, one could imagine that the perfect symmetry above has not only mathematical beauty, but also experiential quality. Perhaps beauty itself, an aesthetic, is an indicator of alignment with that symmetry. It's striking that humans find symmetry beautiful, be it in art, music, or faces. A symmetric face is often rated more attractive. Symmetrical music with themes and recapitulations can be more pleasing. Some evolutionary reasons exist for this, but some philosophers like Plotinus or other Platonists might say beauty is the soul recognizing the signature of the divine, which we can reinterpret as the signature of fundamental symmetry. To bring it to NHIs, if there are entities advanced enough, maybe they perceive meaning and pattern as one. For example, a human might look at a crop circle and see just art or a hoax, but imagine an intelligence that sees it and immediately intuits some mathematical message or resonant thought, like how we might see an equation and feel understanding. Perhaps communication from advanced beings, if it's happening, is encoded in symmetric patterns like those geographic or geometric motifs often reported in visions or even in some alleged UFO encounters. One could recall the story in Carl Sagan's Contact, which is fiction, where pi's digits contained in a circle pattern implying intelligence behind math. In sum, the bridging of consciousness and symmetry is an open frontier. It's where hard science meets introspection and even spirituality. The idea that reality's core might be simultaneously mathematical and mental is ancient. Pythagoreans, mystics, etc., and resurfaces today in things like the integrated information theory of consciousness, which posits that consciousness corresponds to certain higher order patterns of information, which are mathematical objects. If IIT is right, then any system that has a certain symmetry information structure is conscious. One might then speculate that the universe as a whole has a monstrous information structure. Could it too be conscious? This ties to the idea of a universe mind or God, but phrased in informational terms. For our exploration, we can say perhaps advanced intelligences, NHI, if they exist, have a much greater grasp of these aspects. They might treat physical reality, consciousness, information, symmetry, all as part of one unified framework, something humans are only beginning to conceptualize. This could allow them technologies or abilities that straddle what we separate into physical and psychic domains. For instance, maybe they can communicate via telepathy, not because of magic, but because they understand how to modulate the fundamental information field that underlies both mind and matter. It's speculative, yes, but it shows the potential implications of a reality that is fundamentally one thing, like a symmetric information matrix, rather than many separate things, mind versus matter, etc. To wrap up this bridging, if the universe is a projection of symmetry, it's not just a dry mathematical statement. It has rich implications for meaning and experience. It suggests a kinship between the laws of physics and the laws of mind and perhaps even spirit. Symmetry often implies unity, and unity is a concept that crosses over from math to metaphysics seamlessly. In a perfectly symmetric state, all parts are in harmony in a mystical ideal All minds and things are one. Maybe there are two languages for the same truth, or maybe not. The exploration is valuable. Thus, we've journeyed through the idea that the hidden order of reality might encompass not only the formulae that govern particles, but also the principles that underlie consciousness. If someday we achieve a colossal theory of everything that merges quantum physics, gravity, and a theory of consciousness, I suspect symmetry will be at its core. Some master symmetry or principle of self-consistency that yields both the material cosmos and the experiential realities within it. Ambitious, certainly, but asking these big questions is how progress begins. So what are the implications for non-human intelligence and the nature of reality? Let's step back and consider the broader implications of everything we've discussed, especially in relation to our two key motifs. Non-human intelligence and the nature of reality is symmetry-based. What new insights or questions emerge when we put it all together? First, if the universe is indeed a projection of some deeper symmetric order, then our efforts in fundamental physics are essentially attempts to discover that order. Every new particle we find, every symmetry we catalog, say the symmetry group of a standard model or a new conservation law, is like finding another pixel or triangle in a grand mosaic. If an advanced civilization exists, it's plausible they might be far ahead in this quest. They might have already uncovered the full pattern. For instance, an alien species 1,000,000 years older than us might know the exact theory of everything and realize, oh, it's a 12-dimensional structure that projects into their 4D world in such and such a way. To them, our understanding might look like how an early cave painting resembled a photo, recognizable but crude. Non-human intelligences might thus have a fundamentally different relationship to reality. They might manipulate it at the level of that deeper code, whereas we manipulate it at the surface level. One way to imagine this, humans build machines by moving matter and energy around directly. We shape metal, burn fuel, etc. An advanced NHI, if it knows the code, the symmetric basis, might perform feats akin to reprogramming on the fly. Think of how in the Matrix movie, Neo ultimately can see the streaming code behind the Matrix and then bend the rules, stop bullets, etc. That's a sci-fi dramatization, but conceptually, if you understood the underlying symmetry deeply enough, you might find loopholes or powerful capabilities that look miraculous to those stuck in the emergent layer. For example, suppose the speed of light limit is a property of our 4D spacetime, but an NHI knows how to shortcut through a higher dimension or a different projection, like using the bulk in a holographic dual or taking advantage of the simulation's deeper or developer model. Then they could effectively appear to break the light speed barrier, which could explain the reported extraordinary flight characteristics of some UFOs, which include instant acceleration, right-angle turns at high speed, etc., defying inertia. One might speculate that they're shifting partially into the layer where those physical constraints are different or absent in E8. In E8 terms, maybe they're operating along symmetry axes that aren't normally accessible, thus bypassing what we consider limitations. This is a highly speculative interpretation, but it shows how viewing physics from a higher level might enable new technology. Another implication, if reality is fundamentally symmetric information, then communication across vast distances or between different realms might be easier at that fundamental level than it was at the surface level. Consider quantum entanglement. Two particles behave in correlated ways no matter how far apart, which Einstein called spooky action at a distance. One way to think of entanglement is that two particles share information outside of normal spacetime. They might be jointly described by one higher dimensional wave function, for instance. That hints that the underpinning reality isn't limited by our space-time separations. Perhaps an advanced intelligence uses entanglement or similar principles to communicate or travel. For instance, some UFO enthusiasts speculate about quantum communication or even consciousness-mediated entanglement, though that's fringe science at best right now. If NHIs perceive reality's code, might they perceive us more deeply than we perceive ourselves? They might see not just our physical form, but our information pattern, like reading our mind or intentions. Some alleged encounters do describe experiencers feeling like the beings knew what they were thinking or induced mental states in them. Again, if we treat those as data, however anecdotal, one could hypothesize a tech or ability to manipulate the conscious interface, akin to a programmer inserting lines of code to change how an avatar behaves. There are also implications for the meaning and purpose of the universe, which inevitably come up when discussing such grand ideas. If the universe is a projection of symmetry, one could ask why. Is there some purpose to projecting this symmetry into a less symmetric form? Many philosophical and spiritual traditions have grappled with why a perfect one, God, Brahman, the Platonic good, etc., would manifest as the diverse, imperfect world. One answer is to experience itself, to play. In Hinduism, Lila, the divine play. Another, to create life and consciousness, who can then recognize the one, basically to have observers who complete the loop of understanding. In our context, maybe the universe's purpose, if any, is for intelligence to arise and eventually figure out the puzzle, to ascend back to symmetry. This almost sounds like a video game. You start in a complex world and your goal is to find the hidden pattern that underlies all leveling up your knowledge until you beat the game and see the code the developer. Interestingly, in many spiritual cosmologies, the goal of sentient beings is enlightenment, essentially realizing the oneness behind the illusion of multiplicity. Non-human intelligences, if some are far older or wiser, might have already achieved much of that enlightenment. They could be on a continuum from just a bit ahead of us to practically godlike. For instance, Arthur C. Clarke's novel 2001: A Space Odyssey posits aliens who trigger human evolution and then eventually merge with the fabric of space and time, the Star Child concept, essentially becoming one with the cosmos. That's a fanciful take on NHI reaching a point where they are the higher level structure. If a civilization got to the point of manipulating space-time energy and information freely, they might become almost invisible to those at lower levels because they could exist in states or dimensions we don't detect. Some UFO hypotheses even consider that maybe the reason we haven't met the aliens is they operate mostly in higher dimensions or a different frequency of reality, occasionally popping in, which might be what UFO sightings are. From a more immediate perspective, thinking of the universe this way encourages us to break down silos between disciplines. You can't fully address nature of reality without physics, but also without philosophy of mind, information theory, and maybe even some openness to insights from the humanities or mystical traditions with due skepticism. The question in our title is the universe a projection of symmetry? Is reminiscent of a Zen koan or a metaphysical riddle. It forces one to consider both the hard objectivity of math and the subjective vantage point of the observer. If humanity collectively started taking these ideas seriously, it could shift how we view our role in the cosmos. Instead of random spectators, we could see ourselves as code breakers in a ground puzzle, or as participants in the universe understanding itself. The late physicist John Wheeler envisioned a participatory universe where observers are necessary ingredients in cosmic evolution. It, from bit, includes the idea that we, by observing, help bring reality into concrete being. In a symmetric universe projection, maybe part of that symmetry couldn't unfold without minds to reflect upon it. Maybe one hand of the universe is the symmetric code and the other hand is consciousness, and together they clap to make the audible reality. This is admittedly poetic speculation, but it aligns with the idea that advanced intelligences and the deep structure of reality are intertwined topics. For practical implications, if by chance any of these exotic ideas prove true, the future could hold unimaginable technologies. Mastery of the base level could mean free energy, teleportation, consciousness transfer, etc. It would be literally playing God from our current perspective. That prospect is both exciting and daunting. Any civilization capable of it would seem godlike to us, sufficiently advanced tech being indistinguishable from magic again. Some thinkers have warned that encountering aliens so advanced could be as overwhelming as ants meeting humans. But if symmetry and universal principles are truly universal, maybe there's hope of communication on the basis of shared logic or math. Carl Sagan and others always banked on math as a language to speak to ETs, sending prime number patterns, the structure of DNA, etc. on plaques and messages. On the other hand, if no such NHI exists or they never reach us, we still have ourselves. The search for the symmetric origin of reality will continue. Projects like particle accelerators, space telescopes, quantum computing experiments, etc., all push the boundary. We might find out the universe's projection mechanism by discovering new physical phenomena, maybe evidence of extra dimensions or detections of holographic noise, or a clear validation of a unified theory. Or we might incrementally get there with theories like loop quantum gravity, superstrings, or new ideas we haven't even conceived. The nice thing about symmetry is that it gives testable handles. If someone claims the universe is E8, that has consequences. For instance, certain particle interactions should occur or certain particles exist. Lisi's theory gave some predictions like a particle that LHC could find. If one says the universe is a 2D hologram, that suggests noise limits on distance measurements. Some experiments have looked for holographic noise in interferometers. If the universe is a simulation, maybe one finds some anomaly like pixelation or unexpected constraints, though that's trickier to test. So these ideas are not just philosophy, they inspire research programs or at least thought experiments about empirical tests. In the end, after all this exploration, one might ask, what if the universe is not a projection of symmetry? What if it's just messy and brute fact, and symmetry is just a human-imposed view? That is possible. Some scientists caution against Platonic idealism. The universe might just be, and our brains find patterns that aren't deeply there. However, the success of symmetry in physics so far suggests otherwise. Symmetry seems to be genuinely powerful at explaining things. And even if the ultimate theory isn't a single neat object like E8, it will likely still be formulated in the language of symmetry, perhaps a pattern of patterns, etc. Thus, we gradually circle back to our title question with a nuanced perspective. The universe, as we know it, certainly arises from symmetrical principles at a deep level. Every law of nature can be seen as emerging from a symmetry or self-consistency requirement. In that sense, yes, the universe is a projection of symmetry or of symmetry breaking. The E8 lattice is one bold candidate for encapsulating that symmetry, showing how far one can push a single elegant structure to explain diverse phenomena. Non-human intelligences, whether real or hypothetical, serve as a mirror for us to think outside our own limitations, considering how reality might look to a mind that perceives more of the source code than we do. And the nature of reality itself, when probed by both physics and introspection, hints that what is fundamental might not be matter or energy as we experience them, but patterns, relations, and yes, symmetry. Okay, so conclusion, a new synthesis of science and imagination. We set out to explore the question, is the universe a projection of symmetry? Along the way, we ventured through high-dimensional lattices, theoretical physics, philosophy of mind, and speculative scenarios involving advanced intelligences. In wrapping up, it's worth synthesizing what this journey suggests about our understanding of reality and our place within it. The E8 lattice provided a concrete focal point for our musings. It stands as a symbol of mathematical beauty and unity, a reminder that the language of math can produce structures of astonishing complexity and harmony. Whether or not E8 literally underpins the cosmos and inspires a mode of thinking that maybe at the heart of it all, nature is elegantly simple. We glimpsed how E8 appears in string theory, the E8 by E8 heterotic strings requiring that symmetry, and how it fueled a daring theory of everything attempt by Lisi. Those examples teach us that striving for unity in our physical laws is not a fool's errand, but the very trajectory physics has been following for centuries. Each major breakthrough has been a unification of laws of forces in disguise. E8, as a unifier of unifiers, remains a tantalizing possibility. Even if a different theory takes its place, the core ambition remains: find the hidden order that explains the visible chaos. We also unpack the notion of non-human intelligence in its grand context. NHI, in its broadest sense, turned out to be a useful way to question our assumptions. By imagining minds unlike our own, perhaps freer from evolutionary blinkers, possibly operating on higher planes of understanding, we challenge the limitations of human perception and cognition. We saw that if such intelligences exist, the very questions we are asking might be trivial to them, or conversely deeply relevant if they too seek communion with the source of reality. Rather than concluding anything firm about aliens or cosmic minds, we used NHI as a foil to reflect on our methods of inquiry. It prompted us to consider interface theory. We see an icon, not the thing in itself, and how an alien viewpoint might see the thing in itself more clearly. In doing so, we appreciated that our perspective is just one of many possible. And unlocking the universe's secrets might require transcending that perspective, whether through instruments, mathematics, AI, or perhaps even collaboration with other intelligences if fate so allows. Oh my Lord, this keeps going. Okay, the concept that the universe may be emergent from deeper symmetries or information structures was a red thread weaving all sections. We encountered it in physics via the holographic principle, the surprising equivalence of a world with gravity and one without. As long as their information, content, and symmetries line up, we entertained it in the extreme with the simulation hypothesis, where our reality is literally a byproduct of some program. And we found echoes of it in philosophical ideas like Tegmark's MUH or Jung's archetypes. In all cases, the theme was what we see is not all that. There is structure behind structure. The origin has many layers, and we peel them. Patterns repeat, symmetries surface. Perhaps if one could peel all layers, one would find not an arbitrary raw core, but a gem of pure order, be it an equation, a geometric object, or a logical principle. It's humbling and remarkable that the human mind can even grapple with these ideas. We are, after all, biological organisms that have evolved to pick berries and avoid predators. Yet, as Lisi noted by invoking Plato, even ancient thinkers sense that the everyday world connects to idealized shapes and principles beyond direct perception. Our discussion repeatedly danced between the concrete and the abstract, one moment talking about UFOs and the next about the mathematics of Lie groups. And that's exactly how a complete picture must be. Reality is experienced with all its mystery, even the fringe encounters people report. And reality is described with all its rigor and predictive power, need not be at odds. They can be part of one continuum of understanding where each informs the other. Science, philosophy, and even mythology could converge to a common truth if that truth is indeed something all-encompassing, like a symmetry. In a fully unified understanding of the laws of physics, the workings of mind, and the patterns of myth might all be explainable as reflecting the same underlying structure. Is that too grandiose? Possibly. History is littered with failed attempts at total understanding. But as we close, consider the stakes and the rewards of even partially succeeding. If the universe is a projection of symmetry, then we are all projections of symmetry too. Our bodies follow physical laws. We are mostly made of water, which obeys molecular symmetry principles. Our DNA has a double helix symmetry, and our thoughts might follow patterns, natural oscillations, maybe even quantum coherence and microtubules, as some have speculated. The unity of the cosmos in us implies a kinship in a literal sense. We come from the universe and share its substance. In that substance, that root is mathematical and symmetric. Then understanding that isn't just an external conquest, it's a journey of self-discovery. We would be recognizing the deeper nature of our own existence. In a poetic twist, one might say we are the universe's way of looking at itself. If the universe contains the code or symmetric scaffold, perhaps through conscious beings, it gains the ability to perceive that scaffold consciously. We, the observer, complete the universe's self-projection by reflecting upon it. In doing so, we potentially close a loop. The projection, the physical universe, and the projector, the underlying symmetry, become aware of each other, maybe even aware they are one and the same. The road ahead to such awareness is long. It calls for novel synthesis and open-minded rigor. We must be wary of pat answers or unfalsifiable claims, but also avoid dismissing big questions as not scientific enough. As our discussion shows, you can go from hard equations to wild speculations and back. And there is value along the entire spectrum. The key is to keep the dialogue between evidence and imagination alive. The history of science shows that today's imagination, continental drift, quantum tunneling, black holes, etc., were once fanciful, can become tomorrow's accepted fact if it's guided by evidence and logic. Ugh. In conclusion, after traversing E8 and NHIs and holograms and simulations, what can we affirm? The universe certainly exhibits profound symmetry in its physical laws and the coherence of its structure from atoms to galaxies. Those symmetries have repeatedly proven to be the projectors of phenomena. The more symmetry, the more fundamental the law. It is thus a reasonable conjecture that maximal symmetry equals ultimate reality. Non-human intelligences, whether theoretical or actual, remind us not to be complacent in our current understanding. There could be vastly more to learn, and other minds could teach or challenge us. And ultimately, pondering the universe as a projection of symmetry elevates our perspective. It encourages seeing connections between disparate things, finding the unity in diversity, and appreciating that reality might have an inner elegance waiting to be revealed. To directly answer the thematic question, is the universe a projection of symmetry? We don't yet know for sure, but evidence and reason suggest it is at least shaped by an underlying symmetry, perhaps one grand symmetry that fractured into the many we see, like a crystal shattering into pieces. Our task is to assemble the pieces back conceptually into that crystal. In doing so, we not only decode the cosmos, but also unlock new powers, technological and intellectual, and perhaps even fulfill some cosmic purpose of self-understanding. It's a quest both scientific and philosophical, requiring both left brain precision and right brain intuition. Let us end with a thought from a Scientific American piece co-authored by Lisi. Quote, if the structure of the universe at the scales of elementary particles does turn out to be described by E8, then we will have achieved a complete unification and have the satisfaction of knowing we live in an exceptionally beautiful universe, end quote. Even if E8 is not the final answer, that line captures the spirit. The ultimate theory, if found, will be breathtakingly elegant. Quote, exceptionally beautiful, end quote. And it will deepen our appreciation of the cosmos we inhabit. And perhaps, as some mystics and scientists alike have implied, that beauty was there all along, projected in every sunrise, every spiral galaxy, every cell, each a fragment of the symmetry that birthed it. To recognize that is to see the world anew, not as a random assortment of particles, but as the grand projection of a hidden, harmoniously ordered reality. Such a vision may inspire in us a sense of awe and connection, a sense that in studying the universe we are gazing at a cosmic hall of mirrors where the deepest patterns reflect in everything, including ourselves. And in that reflection, one might say we catch the glimmer of the code, the shape, the symmetry that perhaps is the ultimate bedrock of existence. Sweet Jesus, that was long. All right, I don't even know. Was Tim's comment up there the whole time? Oh boy. Yep. Yes, it was. All right. Time to go through the comments. Oh, my Lord. I didn't think I was going to get through that before the end. All right. Just give me a second to catch my breath. My God. That thing just went on and on and on and on. It just didn't stop. It was absolutely nuts. Wow, we have more than 1,000 views already on YouTube. I wasn't expecting that. I'll take it, though. All right. Let's see. I'm going to try to go through this very rapidly, folks. All right, so all scientists are in love with Susie. I don't know what that means, but that's what Rover Bet 3858 said. Simon Keene is saying, haven't been thinking about our visitors much lately. Been going down the investing rabbit hole. Hope you're good, Sean. Awesome channel, man. Thank you, Simon Keene. And thank you for being a member. I appreciate you. Sally Forth alone is saying, that is so cool, Tim. How did that affect you? All right, so David Medora's channel, The Beauty of E8 for visual. Yeah, there's actually that quantum gravity group, quantum gravity research or whatever it's called. They have a channel on YouTube that goes through all this stuff. Like they have pretty good. There's like this redheaded woman that talks about this stuff. As Simon Keene saying, anybody been following the 3A Atlas, 3AI Atlas thing? Or it's 3I Atlas. Yeah. I haven't been, but I think it's stranger and stranger. All right. Sorry, folks. I'm not going to read every comment. I'm just going to try to blast through this as quickly as I can. Okay. Okay, so Randy Wilson 1000 saying, I've been reading about the monomyths, and I may be in a left field, but it reminds me of the aberrational creation myths of a dream time. Yeah, it could be. It could be totally related to that. M hypothesis, MUH. Scott Ian, correct. Let's see. Spiderbite says, we are the universe. We are imagining everything so that we are not alone. We are the greatest nothing. We have many universes, all own set of rules. But why we are here in this place now? Good question. So Spiderbite answers her own question. We are here now because we chose to be. This place here is our place of choice. We can be anywhere else. Here is good enough for now. Okay, so Sally Fourth Alone says, I'm going to come across the X7Q5A96 channel. It's supposedly an ARG, but I find it interesting that YouTube presented it to me the night of the UFO hearing in September. I'm sorry that the algorithm rules you. I get by despite the algorithm. Okay, so Tim Beck says quasi crystals, bravas, lattices, holography. Oh my. Spiderbite says shapes are energy. The vibrations from the frequency creates shape, which becomes form. Us and the universe are pure frequency, vibration, and energy. If the sound stopped, it would all go away. The system is perpetual. Everything resonates. The sound continues. Spiderbite continues. Okay, so Solite US Expat says Elephant Journal is a popular online publication focused on the mindful life, covering topics like wellness, yoga, sustainability, relationships, and arts from a conscious, eco-friendly perspective. Okay, so it is real. That's helpful. Let's see. Spiderbite continues. The beginning, I think, was either a boy sitting in his bedroom writing code and creating his online world with all the characters that are us. I hope not. Or it started with one who is everything. There's only one. It is literally everything. We are its creation. We are it. We were lonely, so we created many different worlds for joy and experiences. Yeah, it's very possible, but Spiderbite. So Tim Beck says, current 93s, I have a plan for this world. Or the Beatles, Fool in the Hill, and everything in between. Spiderbite says, the thought alone creates a sound. Only those tuned in can hear. All the thoughts in the world may never stop, creating a perpetual reality, turning sound into form. Whoever we think about, we will create. Hey, good to see you, Dendritic Fractals. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. This is a good shite, as usual. Okay, so Spiderbite says we have filters. We have a filter code, crack the code, made mostly of limiting beliefs and fear. And Tim Beck says art for art's sake. Dendritic Fractal says 5 senses reality is a hilariously small slice of what's going on around us. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we see like a tiny fraction even of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is just visible light. Art is greater than content. Thank you, Sally Forth. I was worried about this one because, I mean, you can see my eyes are like red from, I think it was like 30 pages of material. I thought it was 27 when I started. And I was just like, so I'm glad I'm glad you enjoyed that. It was tough. Okay, so Roger Claiborne says every potential has a potential time and place. Every potential may eventually repeat with a frequency. So Tim Beck says stories we tell ourselves to better understand ourselves. Wink and nod. Dendritic Fractal said the map is not the territory. Very true. Hey, SNX Radio, Spider Bite. Hey, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Yep. So within, so without. As above, so below. Yeah, it's just a hermetic principle. It's like pretty old. Okay, so Roger Claiborne says expanding your consciousness with this knowledge of new potentials resonates with a new conscious scale of realization. New scales of conscious resonance is a new dimension. Okay, Spider Bite said, I had a huge revelation last night of what everything is. I felt it was the empty beginning. Spider Bite continues, we are one, and I was lonely, so I created us in every type of world and experience. You can never imagine why we are here with perceived limits in our greatness. Okay, so Woo Riders DBGG is asking, what's up, Sean, what's up with Tulsi Gabbard and her tasked with bringing disclosure to the forefront? Government's never going to disclose. They've like I don't believe anything they say anymore. Like I didn't even watch The Age of Disclosure because I'm just like it's another op. Clearly, it's another op. So, hold on. Using logic, wanting the answer with all your heart, tireless searching can lead to divine revelation. Spider says, I think we set the rules to stay in one reality at a time. Otherwise, we would jump all over the place all the time. I'm sure there are plenty that do, and we will again. Don't despair. Yeah, Roger Claiborne's like, I jump all over the place. Spider says, me too. So Sally Forth Alone says, I would like to jump to whichever reality has me in Arizona instead of Pennsylvania. Where there's a will, there's a way, Sally, Roger Claiborne says. So Spider says, I tried to change mine to sitting on the deck of a tree house in the jungle with my feet dangling in the cool water, kicking back, taking it all in, knowing I'm a part of it all. So Sally Forth Alone said, Roger, I just got deja vu. Maybe that's a good sign. Let's see. Okay, so Roger Claiborne said it's no computer simulation unless you hook permanently into a virtuality headset. Spider says, I don't think they are our creators. Maybe they have some type of overseeing role. They keep the system running. They have the key code, the back door. Hey, thank you, Triples World, who likes my background image. Okay. So Triples World says, I've got to observe some sweet things in life like quantum entanglement. Roger Claiborne said the universe isn't math either, therefore it is infinite. So Triples World said, when is Mr. Gillis coming back? A lot of football on during the holidays, probably after January. He just had an episode on Wednesday. I mean, it was recorded like a month and a half ago, but I'll probably I'm starting to run out of episodes. I'm only 8 episodes ahead, which is about a month ahead, and I need to start building my catalog in January. So I'll probably just ask him over the break. We just cut 2 more episodes or something. Sorry, folks. I'm just trying to blast through this as quickly as I can. Yeah, Soulite Expat is writing, or US Expat is writing 49 likes. Please hit the like button. Like the content, please. Yeah, you know what? It's a good prompt. Oh no, no. Okay, here we go. Okay, so spider bite is saying I don't know Douglas Adams. Archon is an ancient Greek word which means leader. I suppose there must be something in a leadership role with lots of foremen. Yeah, I know. I know. I think Sean needs to come up for air pretty soon. It's the source, the monad. Darren Lehman is writing. Hey, missing time. Good to see you. Everybody takes in a big conscious breath. That's how we start to break the code. So Stu of Matt saying symmetry is mirrored. True. And then Triple's World saying my 10 years in prison did not seem simulated. That, that sounds fair. Stu of Matt says prison is only simulated by the unprisoned. So Tim Beck says Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, author Adams at Spider. Fun, absurd stuff. Yep, 42 is the answer to the universe. Okay. The spiritual ascension said, I'd like someone to explain this realm of light to me. It's a good question. Okay. Okay, so Roger Claiborne is saying, does any realm truly exist when you're not observing it? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Okay, spiritual ascension is saying, I've been in the void that I remember. Realm of light, not so much. Spider Bite says it goes back to we could be anywhere. We chose to be here because it's the perfect place, the perfect moment. Where else do you want to be? Speaking of, where's Gray Owl? He's late. So riff on Soldier. Yeah, exactly. Does Oprah exist when I don't watch her? I hope not. Stu of Matt. Okay. Roger Claiborne says, do we choose to be here or is it our time frequency now to be here? What is now? How soon is now? Definitely choice. I wouldn't be anywhere I don't want to be. 100%. Whoa, 100% the chicken came first. Only a chicken can lay a chicken egg. Got to have the bird first. But how can you have the bird if you don't have the egg? All right, matrices do have implications, as so does unitary matrices too, Matt says. Does God choose to be Satan? Satan is the dark aspect of spiritual ascension says. Spiritual sometimes letting go of control and randomness is the choice. Roger Claiborne says. The special unitary group 3 is interesting. Stu of Matt says. All right, Spider-Bite says life keeps going on because we are self-replicating and the frequency of keeping everything as a perceived solid form. Let's see. Sorry, folks, I'm just kind of racing through, but so Meg Caro is saying Bose-Einstein condensates, BECs, a highly coherent quantum state where particles behave as a single entity capable of extreme energy efficiency. Interesting. Okay, Sally Forth Alone says if we're all one, then is it insignificant when a particular person triggers your spiritual awakening, or might it be a good idea to stay connected with them? I don't know, maybe stay connected with them. Oh my God, how many comments are there? Sorry, folks, if I'm skipping. I'm just trying to we're already 12 minutes over, so I'm desperately trying to catch up. Okay. Oh, Meg, apologies, I came in late. Who was he reading? We were talking about E8 and the E8 supersymmetry and how it relates to NHI and reality. Okay. All right. So Solar US Express says, "Hey Sean, I saw you finally got to interview Dr. Joe Gallenberger. How did it go? Did you speak about any woo stuff? And if so, did you mention the ones that I brought to your oh man, I forget what you brought to my attention. Oh yeah. The ones that Dr. Joe Gall. Yeah, we talked about all that stuff. There's 2 episodes. They'll be in the last Monday and Wednesday of the year. Literally the last 2 episodes of the year. So, whoa, what? I'm on that kryptonite. Oh, I thought somebody was talking about Kerp. What's that? Stu of Matt says, "Hey, I was just talking about the line groups. Multipass. Yep, Fifth Element. Good movie. Hey, Foxy Joe. Good to see you. this script. Yeah, ChatGPT wrote it. Like that's what I said in the very beginning. I came up with the topic and ChatGPT wrote it. Oh my god. So many comments. Not that that's a bad thing. That's a great thing. I'm fighting to get through this. Hey, Darren Lehman, thank you so much. He writes, new here with the other parts of me. Hi, other me's great show. I very much appreciate that. Thank you very much for I'm not sure if it's a super sticker or super chat, but either way, I always appreciate those. Thank you. Okay, so Fred's saying the only good thing about Age of Disclosure is that Hal Puthoff seemed desperate to talk. I think he might disclose if he's close to death. That's interesting. Patrick Jackson. I know I looked at Tim Beck said I got to look at him again. Oh, it says now we need to edit, but no. Oh, I appreciate that, Tim. Yeah, you know what? I would love. I don't. I think that would be pretty hilarious. Not me hilarious, but I think if I interviewed Kerp, that would be hilarious. No, I have a stack of work that I have to do as soon as I'm done here. So I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm just trying to breathe. Okay, so Solite USX, but I still say get that debate going next month between Nathaniel and Dr. Giorgiani. I'm sure that will get. Yeah, the question is do I ask them to do it live or just pre-record it? But I'd rather have them like talk about a topic where they have some loose agreement, and then they can kind of discuss but a debate would be, I don't even know how to predict. It's like unpredictable. It's like there's no solution to that problem. Thank you, Spiritual Ascension. Oh, thank you. Stu of Matt says I love Al so much. I two of them woke me up this morning at 4:21 a.m. Because they like gather right behind my house in the like early morning. Let's kill God. I love that name. Let's kill God. Nathaniel versus George Johnny is the sign of the end times. Yes, yes, indeed. All right, night, folks. Don't let like. Yeah, I gotta get something to eat. I'm feeling lightheaded after that. Good Lord, that was a lot. It was like 30 pages single space. That's what we went through tonight of material. So I'm like bleary eyed from it. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining. I always appreciate seeing you. And yeah, where is Gray Al? What is going on? Where's Gray Al tonight? He's late. He's late. We gotta bust his balls next time he joins. Just to, he's always telling everybody he's late. Like he was he's absent. He was absent. So anyway, have a phenomenal rest of your weekend, and God bless and Godspeed with your as we edge toward the holidays. So we'll talk more because we still have plenty of live streams between now and then. So good night and God bless.